The Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Martin Schmieren and I'm the chair of this committee. So to begin with, a few matters of housekeeping as usual. In the case of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for the meeting, so if an alarm does sound, please evacuate City Hall by going down the main staircase and out to the War Memorial in front of the building. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Please mute those microphones when not speaking. The meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly and set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left and going around the room.
Councillor Keith Driver.
Councillor Paul Kendrick.
Councillor Richard Laws.
Councillor Ben Price.
Councillor Ted
Bolton.
Councillor James Wright.
David Harwood, the independent member.
Tony Begins, Director of Property Housing.
Teresa Sharman, Head of Internal Audit.
Robert Mays, Head of Finance.
Isabel Britton, Director of Finance.
Jan Robinson, Head of Legal and Governance.
Emily Yule, Exec Director for Resources.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Right, thank you very much, everyone, and welcome. And so the next item is apologies. No apologies. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Yes, I apologise because I'm going to leave early because I've got a City of Sanctuary event this evening.
Of course, that's absolutely fine. So just feel free to leave whenever you need to, and I hope that event goes well. There are no other apologies as far as I'm aware. So we then move on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any councillors who have got a disclosable pecuniary or other registerable or non-registerable interests? Don't see anything, so that's fine. We move on to item 3, which is public questions or petitions, and none have been received. So we can now move on to item 4, which are the minutes. The public and exempt minutes from the meeting held on the 21st of October 2025 are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy that need to be raised in both the basically on either part of the minutes? Okay, wonderful. So if no points are raised, I will ask for a proposer. I'm happy to propose those minutes. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Driver. So we'll go to the vote. Are we all in favour of those minutes? Written. So one abstention, and the rest are all in favour, I believe. Am I correct there? Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Right, there is a change to the agenda, and at this point I think I need to hand over to Isabel to explain what that is, because it is quite significant.
Yes, we're removing item number 7, which is the statement of accounts, and I've just got a short sort of statement to make. We are not going to comply with the statutory audit backstop date that's obviously been set out. So we won't meet that date of the 27th of February 2026. And this delay is primarily related to the final reporting outcomes and their timeliness. So obviously we've been waiting for a report, or we've been working with EY on that report. And there were several technical points within that external report we got that were not consistent with our own knowledge and experience. And having received the report late as well, we decided we'd put it from this agenda and we'd look at that at a future date. So we do have a date in for this group on the 10th of March, and we're proposing that we think we would bring that to that 10th of March date. Officers and the external auditors are continuing to work collaboratively to complete the outstanding audit areas. And as I said, we will let you know about the revised report once we've got that ready, and any learning and improvements will be reflected as an addendum to the annual governance statement. So obviously once we've once we've got that report from the auditors, we add the items of that onto the annual governance statement as an additional addendum. So the implications of that are, obviously we've not formally complied with the statutory requirements, so we will have to publish an explanation on the council's website, and we will have to submit an explanation to HCLG as well. But the commitment is there to publish this as soon as possible with the right outcomes, and with the working with EY on making sure that report is the best reflection of the council's position.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I had discussed this with officers late last week and again earlier today, and obviously this is not an ideal situation or state of affairs. So I'm happy to allow questions on the sort of implications of missing this backstop date. Obviously we won't go into the details of the statement of accounts because we'll deal with that on the 10th of March. But if any members have got any questions about what has just been said there, I'm more than happy to take them. Councillor Price, I see your hand is up.
Naturally, Chair, naturally. Okay, so that was a very ambiguous statement about the reasons why you have an ambiguity between yourselves and the external auditors. Notwithstanding the point that you've said you've received their information late, can you give us the date of when you did receive that? And can you go into detail about what the differences are? And does this relate, and specifically, does it relate to wholly owned companies?
No, the items that we're concerned about are just technical issues that we were waiting information from that doesn't relate directly to the wholly owned company. Obviously, there was information within the report that talked about the wholly owned company, but I think that is not the point that we are discussing with them. We were waiting for some pension information for one thing, and another item as well that we've just received. We received on Friday. So the report that we received was Wednesday evening was when we received the report, and obviously then once we've received a report we still have to go through the cycle of, so that was myself and Rob that received the report. We then still need to talk to Emily about that report, and Lou, and obviously the cabinet member. So you know, all of that, there wasn't enough time. We wouldn't have been able to publish in time for this group to read that report, so that's why we're delaying that report.
Are there any further questions on this delay? As I said, we will be covering what is basically, and I assume an updated version of of what is item 7. So on our agendas, pages 111 to 264, on the meeting on the 10th of March. So the plan is that we have scheduled in some training with Teresa about internal audit. That will take about an hour, and then the rest of that meeting will be dealing with specifically with this particular item. I'm going to bring in Councillor Bolton and then Councillor Price again, if that's okay.
What assurance can we have that this won't reap any negative consequences this year? And what assurances can we have that it won't happen again in subsequent years?
I think it's the delay that we're talking about is obviously a 2-week delay, which I do not see having any negative effect on the position. I mean, obviously this has no reflection. There's no reflection on our financial resilience. We've got a budget that's due to go tomorrow night, a balanced budget, which obviously reflects the stability of the organisation and its financial position. So this is not any reflection of that. This is a reflection of the way that some technical aspects of the audit have been reported, and just us making sure we get the right information in that report. And for future, we're just obviously working towards making sure we reach those backstop dates. It's been a difficult couple of years, as you can well imagine, and working with the auditors to give back the assurances of all of the previous years' worth of accounting is quite a difficult position to be in anyway. Just to note that the audit is going to be disclaimed, and it was always going to be disclaimed, as are most of the audits across the country, because auditors say that it will take 3 to 4 years to build the assurances up of all the years that we've missed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Price, I think you had a second question.
It was just a follow up, so I appreciate the answer. And so it's sort of 2-part question. So the first part is really, you were talking about receiving stuff back on Wednesday, not providing you enough time to kind of fulfil that. I think that's fair comment. So is it the fault of the external auditors taking too long to respond to you on that issue, or was the information that they were requesting submitted quite late in the day by ourselves? So who is ultimately responsible for this? So is it the fact that we've been slow in submitting that information, which then has come back? Okay, or is it that they have just been unfair on the time? The follow-up question is, you talked about an amendment to the AGS, and we're supposed to be agreeing the AGS today, but we've not agreed any amendments. So how does that work? Should we be postponing the AGS as well?
So with regard to sort of laying the blame, I wouldn't like to lay the blame at either of our doors at this point in time. There was obviously some throughout the audit process. My team have been providing information to the auditors since September, and obviously that has been ongoing for that period of time. So there were periods in the audit where the auditors were available, and then things maybe how can I say this? We've been working with them for the last 6 months. The final audit element, it just took time for us to consider first drafts of reports, and then to get responses back to them, and then to get the second draft of the report, which still had items in it that we just wanted to provide final technical papers on. So I'm not going to attribute the blame to either side at the moment. It was a combination of, you know, these things do take time, unfortunately.
So obviously go on about the AGS. So just for the record, I wasn't placing blame. I was looking for where the responsibility lies.
Yeah. So I think we should
blame's the word that you chose to select. But from your answer, what you've said is that there was a significant amount of time, perhaps that wasn't the word you used, but significant amount of time between receiving the audits back and responding. So am I right in understanding that that's where you feel the ultimate delay was in our responses to receiving their information back at different points during the process?
No,
sorry.
No, not at all. At all. I think it's probably constraints on both sides, resourcing on both sides, people being able to answer in I am confident, and I can say confidently, that our team have responded quickly and responsibly to all of the audit queries. It's a very, very complex issue. And as you understand, the audits have changed over the years. They've just become more and more complicated. So that it was just, that's literally the effect. With regard to the AGS, what I would hope we could do tonight is agree the AGS as it stands at the moment, with the sort of caveat that when we look at the reports, we add an addendum to the reports as well. Once we've got that final audit report, we will word something and say, actually, will you agree this to be added to the AGS as well? Because it will obviously reflect what the audit report will say.
Okay, I mean, so the point was, if we are agreeing the annual governance statement, we are not agreeing the amendment that you want to put.
No, you'll only be agreeing so that it would be an agreement of the AGS as it stands at this date.
Yeah.
And then once we've got the audit report and we do that additional addendum, because that we haven't got that final audit report, so that additional addendum will reflect the new audit report, and you'll be able to agree the addendum can be added to
that will be agreed by the committee at a later
at
date.
the same time. At the same time.
That now makes sense. And so just to pick up on Councillor Bolton's question again, you talked about the additional complexities around performing the audit with external audit this year. And so his question was, what's the assurance that this doesn't happen again? So some of the issues that you've encountered could have been foreseeable because of the reality that, you know, the framework that you're operating in, and some can be because there is disputes. So what assurances are we receiving in terms of you know, having enough resource in the future so that we don't miss the next backstop? So what lessons are we learning, and what steps are we going to take for next time?
I think there's something around making sure we've got those lessons learned from this process and understanding what once we get that final audit report, it's obviously highlighted a few items to us that we probably will need to reflect on for this year as we get audited. And also we have committed, we've had a number of meetings with the auditors, as you can imagine, over the last few days, and committed to working with them to make sure that we are going to reach those milestones and make sure that we get the timeliness of the audit working with the finance team in the right way. So we basically project manage that going forward.
Chair, I would suggest that it would be worth the committee understanding what those kind of significant battles were this year, so that you get peace of mind and some assurance around the process next year.
Could I when we bring back that second report, we were actually going to share with you, I mean, how we share that, we would share the items that we're talking about, because they're nothing that we shouldn't be sharing. They're not confidential or anything, but they're just accounting technical issues that we were thinking we would share anyway. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've obviously had also discussions with officers about this in the last few days, and just so that the answers are in camera for everyone, I asked about what other councils have fallen foul of this rule previously, and then also what are the implications reputationally for Norwich City Council in particular when it comes to things like joint ventures and other financial arrangements going forward. So maybe Isabel or Robert or Emily, you might want to just quickly respond to those.
There shouldn't actually be any implications for us just filing. Effectively, we're going to be filing 2 weeks later. Obviously, we've missed a backstop date, which is a statutory date, but realistically, we've got a set of accounts that we ourselves have signed off at this point in time. We're just waiting for that updated audit report. So I don't have any concern that this is, reputational risk at all for us.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this delay? This item number 7 has been withdrawn from the agenda. So just to note that. Okay. We now move on to item number 5, which is the progress report on internal audit activity. And I'd like to hand over to Teresa to introduce this report, if I may, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first progress report of the 25-26 audit plan. So we've now got 6 final reports, which are detailed on page 30, is a good place to see those. There are 5 positive assurances, and the corporate governance is the limited assurance opinion. You've got the exec summaries in Appendix 2 for you. Management have also done a bigger response for you in Appendix 4 on the housing statutory compliance checks. So you've got each recommendation and a response, and they've given you some details on how complete those recommendations are as well. So a bit more detail on that one. In terms of a bit of an update on some of the audits for you, the planned housing maintenance audit that is behind in the report is now at draft stage. And most of the other audits have actually started, apart from the key controls one, which is not scheduled to start until March. In terms of the deferred and cancelled audits, we have a few of those, which is they're up on page 25. Now, 2 of those audits were deferred because the regulator of social housing is doing an inspection, and our audit scopes will most likely be covered by the work they do in the inspection. So we're going to wait and see the outcomes of that, and then pick up the audits next year as we need to, and we'll decide, is an audit needed? Can I rely on the housing inspectors' assurances, or is it like a bit of a follow-up on any actions they say? The application audit, that was cancelled because the council didn't get the system update, so there's no need to do that audit. And then the housing delivery one on nutrient neutrality, because there are going to be some changes in the planning framework and the scheme was in its infancy, we agreed that we would defer that audit till next year and rethink whether it was worth doing at that point. Excuse me. And then there's a new table on page 28 for progress with implementing recommendations. So on this table, we're trying to show you those which are past their due date and those which are still within their due date, so that you get a kind of better picture of the recommendations that are in play. And you've got in brackets, that's the total number of recommendations that we made, and we're showing you how many are closed so that you can do your maths and see how many are past the due date and how many are within the due date. So at the moment, 12 recommendations are past their due date. And then you've got in the final appendix details of management's responses for where they are with implementing those and any revised due dates. I'm happy to go to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Bolton to start with, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The application audit being cancelled, what assurances can we have that the system that has not been replaced is still adequate, and that we're not exposed to any extra risk because of not updating the system? Thank you.
Emily, do you want to respond or?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take that one, given that IT falls within my portfolio. So the system that's in place, our CRM system, is fully functional. It provides all services to our members of our public and our customers that it needs to do. We are continuing to work on some enhancements to that software so that our staff have the best possible experience at using it from the kind of back end, but we're not exposed to any risks. And we also have made sure with our supplier of that system that the system will continue to be supported from their side.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the transparency code limited assurance, obviously, I'm sure members were concerned when seeing that. Got a few questions together. Given the limited assurance opinion on the transparency code compliance, how long have these weaknesses around senior ownership and oversight been present? So how long have they been present for?
Jan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I can't answer that because I only started here at the end of last year, so I don't know how long they were there before then. But since then, we have taken a really robust look at it. We've welcomed the audit. It was an independent view, independent assurance as well, which has given us a really good oversight. And we worked really hard since then to make sure that we are complying or nearly at compliance level.
Good. Well, I'll just respond to the officer, and I appreciate that the audit has helped shape the work, and I do receive assurance from that. So ultimately, we could speculate that issues existed indefinitely as well. Then, if we can't actually have a timeline on it, then perhaps it's always existed and it's always been a weakness. So would that be fair to say? Potentially. I mean, the Act came in 2014, 2015. Okay. So there has been some data put together, but it was a bit ad hoc. There wasn't a definitive place where it was all set, and we didn't have one person in charge. We've now rectified that. And if you go onto our website, you'll see a lovely new web page with the new website, which is called Open Data, and the information is really easy to access, which we can already see has had a knock-on effect with our FOIs. Definitely, and that's good, and it saves resource. And then the officer's response leads on to my second question on this particular subject. So how can members be confident that this is not symptomatic of wider weaknesses in governance controls across other service areas? So by your own admission, you were sort of saying it was an ad hoc basis, bits were here and there. So where's the assurance that we don't see these other kind of ad hoc systems without named officers, which are not being monitored across a wider sort of governance suite of work?
So from a governance type of view, we are really working actively across all service areas of the council to make sure that we are doing.
Jan, I think your microphone stopped working. I'm struggling to hear a little bit. It might be my
Sorry.
darkness. So if we could just make sure we're all using
It
microphones,
went
please.
off and on, so. Yeah, so across all service areas, we're working very hard with across all levels. We also have now an assurance board, which meets very regularly and looks at all elements across the council to make sure that those governance aspects are in place and they are reviewed. We know when we've got some flags coming up when things are not happening, and we're making sure that the senior leadership team focus on them and make sure that we bring them up to scratch where appropriate.
Just to respond to that, Chair, I think that's good assurance to have the assurance board. So can you just let the committee know where that reports into in terms of councillors? Does that report into Cabinet? Is it annually, quarterly? And so as our responsibility, which is making sure that governance is operating effectively in the council, how do we get assurance of the work of the assurance board if their reports are not presented here at any point? Thank you.
So it does all link in. It's through our performance team that bring anything that is flagging, as I say, amber or red. That performance goes to Cabinet. ONS or Audit can choose at any time to have a look at anything on that performance dashboard or housing dashboard that they have concerns about.
So there's no intention to present it to the committee in any way, but the offer is for us to actively seek out, and there is some assurance there, Chair, that it goes to Cabinet. So I think it's kind of a thought for you to consider whether or not you want those reports to come, maybe an annual report from the assurance board, so that this committee receives the assurance, because we are not getting the assurance of the assurance board unless we are saying that our assurance is that Cabinet have responsibility. So it's up to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll look to officers about the viability of doing that. Emily, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to flesh out the answer a little bit more. So Assurance Board is predominantly a kind of management space. So it's information that we use as the leadership and the officer management of the organisation to make sure it's running in a healthy way. However, lots of the information that comes to Assurance Board does go on to Cabinet and other forums in various guises. So things that we look at include the risk management, which obviously comes here. We look at performance indicators, which go to Cabinet, and of course scrutiny could then look at those reports in advance. We also have health and safety data, so we have a health and safety board that then feeds into Assurance Board, and we're planning an annual health and safety report to Cabinet, as again part of the enhanced governance arrangements that I have to say have been made very much more rigorous since Jan has been in post. Some of the other information, for example, HR metrics stay within the officer space, except when there's a specific piece of work that comes to scrutiny, for example, like the HR processes report. So there are routes for the majority of that information to be fed in that already exist. And then if there's anything that's going on to a Cabinet agenda, scrutiny has the ability to ask to see that before it goes, or indeed review it afterwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That sort of reassures me. I don't know if Councillor Price, you had any follow up on that particular one, or
well, the officer has stated where the assurance lays.
Yep.
It lays mainly with Cabinet and it lays with senior management. And if that is assurance enough for the committee and the chair, then that's assurance enough.
Thank you. Did anyone have any other questions? Otherwise, I've got some. Yes, right. David, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to page 23, please? 23 of 294, where it says there's 19 audits in the 25-26 audit plan. But when we got the plan back in May 25, there were far more audits than 19 listed in the document we were presented with, and I think there were either 4 or 5 that said we're going to be low priority, because I asked a question specifically about the one on allotments and said they weren't going to be done. So what's happened to the rest of the work that was presented to us?
So do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think you're right. The low ones, there were several low ones that were indicated in the plan, and we said at the time that the low ones, there wouldn't be enough budget to do the low ones, but as they were low, we were not overly concerned about doing them in the plan. I think there were also some advisory days that were put in the plan for several things. So I did some days on the digitalisation project, not many days in the end, but the other ones didn't go ahead. And then I can't remember what else would be in the plan that's not there without going back to look, unless you know, David.
Well, I do, funnily enough, because I've asked the question. So there's payroll and expenses, right to buy scheme weren't included. There's a piece about data protection that wasn't there. There was also on the spreadsheet that was presented a heading that said all quarters, whatever that might meant. And under there were 4 separate pieces of work that aren't shown in the report that we've got now about development management, environmental health and public protection, private sector housing regulation enforcement, and corporate strategy and performance. And so it's just a matter that this is the first progress report of the year, even though we've only got 6 weeks or whatever it is until the year end. So is that work going to be undertaken?
Oh, there it goes. Some of those you listed, there were about 4 pieces of work that were advisory. So the digitalisation project was the one I spent some time on, because I did some testing on the new forms and went to the project board meeting and some of the weekly stand-ups. The other ones, there was 3 other advisory, I think at least. They didn't come into anything. Payroll and expenses is in the plan, and the right to buy is in the plan. I think most of them are there, or they're either advisory or low priority.
Thank you. The reason I
bring in Emily if you want to add anything else on this.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, on page 31 of your agenda pack, page 9 of the internal audit report, there's a table and it refers to the low priority audits. So it states there that there were no days available to complete council tax and NNDR, learning and skills, environmental services and allotments, and then it also refers to the advisory work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. The reason I asked the question is obviously there are 4 audits that have either been deferred or cancelled. And again, when going back to last May when we were presented with the plan, the report said it'd be flexible, subject to quarterly review to meet the changing needs of the council as necessary. So when those 4 audits were deferred, what audits were presented to the assurance board to replace them? The reason I ask is that each year the 3 years that I've so far been on the committee, we presented with a plan March or April time. We then go through the year and audits are knocked off. And in fact, we end up with having 25 or 30% less audits than we've signed for at the beginning. And the question is, if we set off at the year end saying we require so much assurance, and then it's knocked off bit by bit throughout the year, if we've got a new process to say the plan is going to be updated on a quarterly basis, it would seem sense to me that if you're knocking something out, you've got days available. What are you putting back in to provide assurance in another area? Because I'm sure there's more than 19 areas across this council that need to be reviewed during this financial year.
Teresa, do you want to come in and about the sort of extra hours and days that we've got potentially available or not, as per the question?
So we've definitely used a majority of our budget. Most audits this year are more days, so I'm not working on 25, 26 audits and getting worried about we might only have 19. We are having audits that are more in depth, using more days. That's one thing. We always knew that we had more audits at the time than the budget could afford. Hence why the low ones didn't get done. And we always knew there would be some movement. So I think at one stage we were thinking that there wouldn't be time to do payroll and expenses. And we were swapping that over with a follow-up of the DBS checks because we decided that is the one that needed to do. But then with the movement of some getting deferred and cancelled, the payroll and expenses audit came back in. So other than that, nothing else was thought to be necessary when we did our quarterly reviews, and we did them every quarter with the assurance board and talked about things. And this has ended up being the final plan. So I'm quite happy with that. We're using all our budget, the audits, we're using all our audit days that the budget can afford. We may have less audits, but I'm not kind of comparing how many audits each time and trying to get 25 or 26 each year. It's not what it's about. So I'm quite happy with where we are.
Thank you. David, did you have any further questions? Otherwise, I'll move on to Councillor Price.
I have a couple of other questions, if that's all right.
By all means, yes, please do.
Okay. Can we go to page 34, please? Where we've got some red actions, and obviously the implementation date for all three has passed. Have they been introduced? They've all been actioned, thank you. Okay, and then can I go to page 49, please? And on page 49, when I get there myself. Can I refer to the SEGD action where we're going to introduce a system to record and flag invoice due dates? And again, it's quite interesting what you've said there about you've maybe got more days across the audits to undertake work. If you go back a page to page 48, and the third bullet point that says testing of payments made to providers identified one instance of a delayed payment from a sample of 3. So you've got one error out of 3. So you've only looked at 3. And on the back of that, you're making a recommendation where you're going to introduce a system, whatever that system might be, to record and flag invoice due dates with these being monitored. So you're creating more work on the basis of a sample of 3 where one's wrong. Is that sample of 3 sufficient to be stretched across the whole population of homelessness invoices? Because I presume there's, I don't know, hundreds a year. I've no idea how many there are, but it just seems to me that having an action based on one error out of 3 invoices looked at just seems disproportionate, because there's nothing in here that says what the there's nothing in the report that tells us what the root cause of the error was. So we don't know why that problem occurred. We've just been told there's an error 1 out of 3. So I don't know if that's for you to answer, Teresa, or if it's for somebody else to answer about the fact is that you've accepted an action which I personally wouldn't have made, but again, it's not me. It's out of a sample where one's wrong out of 3. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to talk about this whole process, how you came to that recommendation anyway, and then I'll ask another officer to decide about the implementation of it.
I mean, without going back to the working papers, I don't know what the population was in order to know whether 3 was a good enough sample in that respect, because it might have been there weren't many providers, and I don't know what the conversation was in terms of management response when they did the debrief and why that was accepted. So you might have to provide information outside unless officers know any more than I do.
Defer to officers. Is anyone able to answer the sort of second part of David's question there about the implementation of this flag, this invoice system?
Sorry, Chair, can I say that rather than an answer be provided, can I take Teresa up and say, can we have a response to all members as to why we've got an action and why that action has been received if only there's been 3 invoices looked at? So I'd be interested to know what the total population is and you know, if somebody's only looked at 3, that brings another issue up. But I think I'd be happy to get a full response after the meeting.
And Robert, is that something you're able to make that noted? Thank you. And then that circulated, the answer to that circulated to members of this committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again,
Thank you.
Being a bit nitpicky, the global internal audit standards do say that when you prepare a work programme or a work plan or whatever it is, within that it says you should be looking at what the total population is and what the sample size is going to be, and even say within it whether or not the sample size is going to be sufficient to provide a view across the whole population. And that's what's required, and that's what I'd expect the contractor to do, to be honest. So that information should have been provided to Teresa before she signed that piece of work off. But anyhow, like I say, that's been a bit nitpicky. But can I go on to the final point, if I can, please, Chair?
Please do.
Which is on page 55, which is about fire risk assessments. And again, in there, it's reported that fire risk assessments were required for 12 properties. And I don't know if they were required, i.e. that was a sample that you've looked at, or there were just fire risk assessments for 12 properties. But it then says there was no evidence for any of the 12 properties that historic remedial actions had been addressed, although management believe the actions were addressed. So we don't know if it's happened, but somebody's told us yes, it has. But is that considered satisfactory for the audit report? Because I'd have thought there'd be something to say, please show us that the 12 that we've looked at have actually been addressed. And again, the reason that's probably important is, again, I've flagged up before, the housing ombudsman made a finding in one of their national severe maladministration reports about the delay that we caused in replacing a fire door. So it's not just a case that we've looked for 12, we've got issues, but we're just accepting management have done it. I think there should be probably a follow-up or something to go back and say, please show us that all these 12 that we've looked at, the remedial action has been done.
Teresa, do you want to start and then? Yeah.
So I think when they say 12, they mean 12 out of the sample that they looked at, not that there's only 12 properties that needed a fire risk assessment. Tony?
Yeah, as you say, as you said, the top 12, but I think picking up on your point around, it's important to understand that, and the systems, and as I say, from when this audit was taking place, and in effect looking at where we are now in complete, that those FRA actions are evidenced, and as I say, as a consequence of that, we can clearly evidence that those actions have been picked up and complete via a tracker that we've got in place now.
Sorry, Teresa, did you want to just respond quickly? Yes, please do. Yeah, and then I'll bring Councillor Price in.
So in terms of your question about information I get and things, so as you all know that with the new standards that have come in place, I've had a gap analysis done by a leading internal audit authority, and I did talk to her about the fact that I have contractors and how I get assured about contractors' work, and what she thought of how I should get that assurance in terms of should I be getting all those working papers and going through them, because at the moment I do get a version of working papers from the main contractor, and with the new contracts I've signed with the other contractors, they are going to be sending me something as well. And she said that she did not think that I should be spending my time looking at their working papers, because they themselves have a quality review process. So my assurance comes from saying to my contractors, what is your quality assurance process of how you ensure that the work that you do is to the standard and what you give me is correct? I shouldn't be spending my time looking through their working papers and repeating their review. But obviously we need to agree with them sample sizes and what is right together, so that they do test the right sample sizes that we're both happy with. At the moment, they will have their own methodology for doing that. That may or may not agree with what we do, but at some point we will comply together with one version of that. So yes, in this example, they may have looked at 3 and that's got signed off at their level. It's something for me to pick up with them, but it's not my job to review their working papers. I don't have the time to do that. It has to be a different assurance sort of reviewing program that's in place with the contractors. Otherwise, I might as well not have them and have my own auditors, if that makes sense. So I did talk that through when we had our gap analysis and what they thought I should be doing. So
there's certainly something there to think about for us as a committee as well, I think. Just to, obviously we've got to note that Councillor Kendrick has just left the meeting, so, and now I'll bring in Councillor Price, who's been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. I do just want to pick up those points there, because I think that what Teresa said is quite interesting, because when Tony kind of responded to say, oh, you know, we have like a robust set of evidence to see that the work has taken place, then obviously naturally my next question is, well, how do you know it's done to standard? And so I would sort of agree with Teresa. Teresa's not there to kind of reinvent the wheel and go back and check it, but there does need to be some assurance that the council is in fact checking the methodology of the contractor, and then is robustly checking that the work is done, not just filled out on a data sheet saying, yeah, we've done it. Because, you know, that's what I used to say to my teacher when I did my homework. Yeah, I've done it, you know. Don't look in my book though, you know, because it's not there. All right. So the reality is, it shouldn't be. That is a waste of days. That's a waste of finance of days that have been financed. So that is a bad use of the internal audit facility. So I think so question to Tony is, it's your area of responsibility to check that your contractors are doing work and doing it to standard, and that you are doing tests, and it shouldn't be thrown over to audit. So are you doing that work? Are you checking their methodology? Are you checking the quality of work? And then I guess the follow-up question to that is, why are internal audit doing that on behalf of the council? Why weren't the council doing that in the first place? That is just a side question to the 2 I have, Chair. So Tony,
we have an answer to that side question first, and then
yeah.
I think.
Can you hear me now? Yes, sorry.
And then your main questions.
Well, yeah, you know, so just to confirm, Tony, so you actually go out and check the work.
Yes.
That's not just what on the database. Yeah. Go and check the work. That's great. Chair, not to interrupt, but if Councillor Wright was a direct point on that, I'd allow him to jump in if it is a direct point.
It wasn't. It was related to the contracts we've just been talking about.
Do you want to go?
Well, I'm
Go on, go. You go.
Thank you. Well, just picking up. just picking up on page 53, there are a couple of references there. So, we've lost the copy of the contract with Gasway and other contracts are out of date. What assurance do we have that that's just related to this service area where it's been picked up as part of this audit and there aren't issues with contract management going on elsewhere in across the council with contracts being lost and us not knowing what we've signed up with other providers? So I guess how much is this a one-off?
Tony, do you want to respond for more the sort of housing side of things, and then maybe I'll look to other officers for the broader question?
Yeah, in essence, yeah, you're right that the contracts we had to track them down. We've got them in place, but going forward, we have systems now that effectively that procurement would have those copies of contracts, contract managers would have those copies of contracts, and on a central point. So we will have that contracts register with those contracts in place, and again being more proactive. And again, what came out of those recommendations? So in a sense, that audit flushed those elements out. In a sense, laid down a marker for us to make sure that going forward and effectively all the contracts that we've got in place now, and bear in mind that we've just recently procured a compliance contract with one provider, going forward on a long-term relationship will make that much easier for us in terms of picking up any relevant issues related to the contract, key performance indicators and performance. So I can assure again committee that we've got that firmly in place.
Thank you. I guess what intrigues me, having been around this place for a while, is I'd always operate on the assumption that probably procurement was the sort of ultimate repository of all contracts, and it comes as, I guess, slightly concerning that they, for example, Gasway, who we've used for many years, they didn't have a copy of that. We had to go back to the provider, so that feels worrying that procurement weren't sitting on those contracts. But maybe that's something that's now being or has been resolved.
Emily, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think it's difficult for me to talk to the historic position on contract management, but what I can tell you is about the current position. And the current position is we do have a centralised procurement function. So our procurement team is now involved in all kinds of procurement, whether that's very small, low value procurements, all the way through to those major contracts. We have a complete contract register, which is monitored by the procurement team, but obviously the management of each of those individual contracts falls to the particular manager within that service area. However, they're working on guidance that's being produced centrally. So there's a lot more consistency to the way that we manage contracts, and there is that central repository of all of those high value contracts. Obviously, we're not going to hold the contracts for very small, like one-off supply and service type contract awards.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Is this a direct point on this? And then I'll bring you in, Councillor Price.
So with the central support from procurement, during a procurement process, where would responsibility lie for that ultimate procurement? Would it be with the support, or would it be with the officer from the service sort of undergoing the procurement process? Thank you.
Yeah, so in the process, we'd have a commissioning manager, and then we have the procurement team that offer support. The procurement team really offer support around the process, so making sure that we have a compliant tender process, if that's required, or a compliant buying process, if it's a smaller value contract. However, the kind of contents of the tender belongs to the commissioning manager, because they obviously know what they need to acquire, and then the management of that contract ongoing belongs to the commissioning manager. What the procurement team do, though, is they do helpful things like reminding managers, oh, by the way, do you know your contract is coming up for renewal? Are you ready? Have you got that re-tender process in train?
Councillor Price.
Yeah, no, that's good work on all of that. And what I would say is that was good assurance from the officer there about the improvements to contract management, because this committee has identified many years ago that there is an inherent weakness in contract management at this council, and that those steps weren't necessary and should have been taken sooner, in my own opinion. But I think that the committee can commend itself for the good work it did in highlighting that, and officers acting on that. So that's a comment on that. that. But I will return to an earlier point raised by the Internal Audit Officer in discussion with the independent member, where it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's referenced that we have fulfilled our financial amount that we've put aside in terms of the amount of days we have for the internal audit plan. But I share some of the concerns of the independent member in the respect that there was a suite of internal audit investigations scheduled and that there was a significant cut to it. And so I take exception to what the internal audit officer has said in terms of that we have enough cover, to have assurance, because having longer internal audits in certain areas doesn't give us a wide suite and a wide view of the areas of risk to the council. So I invite the internal audit officer to respond to that. But what I would say is that if the internal audit officer can address the amount of days in terms of finance, that is one thing, but it's not the same as coverage. So I don't take assurance from less amounts of audit. I do take assurance from greater, more in-depth analysis work undertaken. But what it says to me is that we're not investing enough financially as a council in our internal audit process in order to get the coverage. And that's my interpretation of the cuts to the internal audit plan. So if the officer wants to respond to that, because either you're spending too long doing some things, like we've just heard about, going and doing this work that should have been done by the council, or those audits that you're doing need to be slightly tightened up, or we need to invest more money to get the coverage, because it's about the coverage. It's about the coverage, not just the in-depthness. So how do we justify that? And should the council not be investing more money to get a better coverage of work? That's one of my questions.
Yeah, well, I'll certainly.
I have one last question after.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll certainly invite Teresa to come in on that.
Okay. Well, I guess it's all about money when it comes down to it, isn't it? Our budget is roughly 100k, just slightly over. We've had a contractor who's had a very cheap daily rate. That isn't going to continue when we procure, literally starting that in April. And the two other contractors that I use are more expensive. We can expect to be paying nearly 500 quid a day. So 500 quid into 100 quid only gives you so many days, and it will be less than you've had. So it's all about trying to balance the money with where we can have assurance. So we will do a plan next year like we did this year. It will probably be oversubscribed and we won't have enough money to do all of it. So we prioritise the audits and say, these are essential, these are high, we want to do those. Most of the mediums will get done and the lows will fall off. And we have to make some hard decisions about it. But going forward, yeah, we because the money's going up, we will have less audit days. But I think some of the audit days we've had for audits in the past before I joined were too small. That's why you get samples of 3. So it's that balance of, if you have small samples, are you really getting enough assurance out of it? So I've moved away from then, unless it kind of works for the audit. We're trying to have more days for each audit, and some of the audits we've done have just needed more days to do the depth of scope. So yes, that will mean we do less audits. It's a balance, and I guess as an audit committee we can talk about that and what we want and have that discussion with the rest of the officers, but there's got to be a balance somewhere. That's the bottom line of it.
I suppose looking at from the council's point of view in terms of internal audit, Isabel, do you want to come back?
All I was All I was going to say with regard to the budget has not changed this year as we go into the new budget. But Teresa and I have started to think about audit planning for next year. We've got time in with the directors, and we'll bring to you a paper of what that audit plan looks like, much like you did last year. But I think there's something about prioritising as well, and thinking about sort of just working out what the best kind of, as Teresa said, prioritising which are the most important areas, and then really working and making sure that we feed back to you about what those changes might be, and why there might be differences in what we actually are able to do. And we will have to maybe address the funding and the cost. But that's something that we won't know until we've actually worked through those with the exec directors and worked out what the priorities are for the year 26-27.
Thank you very much, please.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. So I'll respond to both those comments, because I think it was actually important to tease that out there. What I would say is that I think we're identifying a weakness there, Chair, a weakness that it's not really disputed, that we're not getting enough coverage there. I didn't really hear from either side that we're not getting enough coverage as a committee. Any pound spent in audit, internal audit process is a very good investment of the council's money, because ultimately, if the internal audit plan is written well, because what that does is that saves this council tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of pounds, as we've noticed at this council down the road. So I appreciate what the officer is saying, okay, and clearly the budget will need to go up significantly, because not only are we not getting enough coverage now, but then to even get an adequate amount of coverage in the future, because I don't think we're getting the coverage. Okay, that's in my opinion, my experience being on the committee. We're not getting the coverage. And then if the actual day rates are going up, there's going to need, I think that is a risk, that is a weakness there, and that this council does need to invest significantly in its internal audit process, so that not only do we get the right level of in-depth investigation, but that we also get the overall amount of coverage as well. And I suppose I would give officers a final comment to come back on that, in the respect of if you can contextualise this particular internal audit plan this year in terms of how it relates to your risk appetite. So how have you measured this internal audit plan delivery against your risk appetite for this year, please?
I think that's more one for officers, perhaps, rather than Teresa. So Isabel or Emily or even Jan to respond.
Yeah.
Oh, Teresa, do you want to? Sorry, come in as well. Apologies.
I think the council has only recently this year done a really in-depth risk appetite and categorising your risks and having an appetite for each one, and then being able to apply that on the risk score. So when we do next year's plan with that in mind, and all audits should be risk-based, so looking at the corporate risk register, looking at what the council's trying to achieve and auditing those processes, not just going, it's time for payroll again, let's do payroll. So we can then take into consideration the risk appetite, because we'll have a very specific appetite for each risk rather than the generic appetite that a lot of people have. So I think we'll be able to take that more into account when we do planning this year. So I think that will be useful.
Response from officers there, and again, that's good work from this committee to actually get this council to finally implement a risk appetite in its work. So again, we're saving so much risk and money for this council, and so that's good work on the committee, and so that should help create a balanced and reflected position on how many audit days you're going to deliver next year and what the coverage is, and ultimately that risk appetite that lays with the senior leadership team, and so they need to know that they are comfortable with where that risk appetite is, the amount of days of coverage, because they will have the ultimate responsibility for that internal audit delivery plan and the amount of risk that they take on, and whether or not it's effective, and the subsequent outcomes of that in terms of downriver, whether or not we didn't have enough coverage, and how that impacts. So it's a big decision for people at the top of the organisation. My final question, Chair, is on, we've had these limited
Councillor Place, just before you do come on to your next question, can I bring in Councillor Driver, who's got a direct point on what you've just said?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is an actual good idea and the risk register for things like this. I mean, if they're taking overall score, so they think, oh, that's a big old score there. We take that out and we go for a couple of little scores and do that. This will be a lot easier and save money. Put it into this one or that one.
You're discussing the risk appetite rather than risk registers.
Well, risk appetite. I mean, I've been mentioning about they're not getting enough money for years. I mention that every single time. You know, nothing we can do about it. Yeah.
Do you want to just quickly come back on the risk appetite versus risk register side of things, or any particular other points that you want to just raise here?
Yeah, so in developing the 25-26 internal audit plan, we did look at our corporate risk register. So we use that to help us inform the work that should be done to create that assurance environment. So what we're doing is we're looking at things that are of greatest risk to the organisation and the checking that we've got assurance in those places. The 26-27 internal audit plan will also benefit from us having done that work around the risk appetite. And I think what we'll then be able to do is not just look at things that are at the most risk, but also things that are risks that we've scored that are not currently in accordance with our risk appetite. So what we're saying is we've got a risk appetite, we're not meeting that risk appetite. So that's something that we need to look at. But of course, that risk-based auditing is only one element of the overall assurance picture, because we've also got the key financial audits, which are our kind of regular audits that we do. And there also might be other kind of project type stuff that comes up that we think needs audit work, or just things that because of the particular year it is or what we've got going on might need some additional work. And that's also where we need the expertise of the committee to help us inform that plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just come in on a point? I mean, I've obviously spoken with officers about certain concerns that I've had, both with sort of things that can be looked at in terms of internal audit, but also with officers directly. I'm thinking things like big projects like joint ventures that are coming up, the Anglia Square redevelopment. We've had issues that seem to have caught us a little bit blindsided. I think procurement and tendering, for example, with regards to the halls, for example. I think there's sort of questions that there needs to be some sort of contingency and scope within that internal audit plan to be able to deal with that. And I think that's a question that we as a committee need to have a little think about. Are all the areas that we need assurance on being covered within that internal audit plan? So I think once we have sight of the 26-27 internal audit plan, I think it's beholden on us to have a look at that, have a real think about, are there big areas that are missing? And then basically, if need be, go to council and cabinet and say, actually, there is not enough budget here, you need to up the hours, because we don't feel we're getting the assurance that we need. That would be sort of my recommendation from what is being said at the moment. I think that's where I'm going to leave that particular item, if that's all right, members, and I'll bring Councillor Price's final point in, if I may. I am also aware of the time.
No, thank you, Chair. No, yeah, I would reiterate that. So what we don't want to see is a presentation of a draft internal audit plan that we're supposed to agree. It is for discussion, and then it comes back for agreement at a following meeting, and that's the only way that can work. And the council and this particular committee hasn't been treated with that respect in recent years. So we've got repeated limited assurance reports coming back now quite consistently over the last couple of meetings, in this report and in the last report as well that was presented last time. So at what point does you can take risk appetite into account as officers or as internal audit officers? At what point does that sort of trigger a formal governance improvement plan, when you start seeing clear limited assurances cropping up on a regular basis? When do we actually say, right, this is a bigger problem than these individual areas we're looking at? So
please do respond. Apologies.
I think that depends. One thing I've done for others for audit planning this year is to analyse all of the recommendations from the previous year into, we have some root cause analysis categories. And that's quite interesting because there's normally a couple of categories where most of the recommendations fall, and we can have them as audit themes. So if all of the recommendations fell into a kind of governance category, then that might indicate maybe there is governance weakness, or it could fall into information. Maybe there's a information weakness. So I think doing some of that analysis and getting insights out of the recommendations and the reports that are coming through will help inform audit planning as well. So that will help indicate if, as you say, there's loads of limited reports coming through, but that may not in itself mean that there is a governance weakness, for example. It's really about what are the recommendations saying, and then collectively, what are they all saying? And if it does fall into one category, looking at that and saying, well, do we all agree with that when we think about the council? Is information a problem or governance a problem? Then we can start to think about, okay, well, what audits might help that? Is it a particular area, or is there be an audit theme that we'll do in every audit? And when we do the training, we'll talk a little bit about insights and foresights there. So you'll start to see a bit about how that's coming into internal audit. But I think that's how we would pick up on things. I don't think having 2 or 3 limited assurance reports is necessarily an indicator of a theme or a weakness in one area, unless the recommendations are actually saying that.
Thank you very much. Are there any final questions before we basically take this to the vote? Right. Yeah. Oh, please do. Yes.
One of the things you may remember in the internal audit plan document that you get, I talk about an audit and risk universe. So although you only see the audit plan, what we could do, perhaps not in the formal meeting because it's a lengthy document to go through, but if I present to you the audit and risk universe, and we've got to make sure that we get everything in there this time, you can then see where the assurances have been against either a risk or a priority or a business area or a joint venture, however we call those items on the risk and audit universe. And then you can see where the gaps are. And if we do some thinking as part of audit planning about why no assurance now, or when assurance, and also think about the other thing we don't talk about is I'm not the only assurance provider. We have other we've already talked about the regulator for social housing and some of the other returns that you do to government agencies, which then come back and say, oh, great, thanks, or oh, what's that all about? So we may not have enough money, but there might be other people doing work that we and I can rely on. So I think that's something else to pick up in our planning. Is there someone else looking at something that we can rely on so we don't spend our money, our time and our days on that because someone else is? We don't want duplication. We want to identify the real gaps where there's no assurance, why we're not doing it, or when are we going to do it, and have those answers so that you get that kind of complete picture. So I think there's work to do there to give you that, which we can spend a bit more time on this year.
Personally, I would welcome that. I think probably members, judging by the nodding, would also welcome it. So if you're able to provide that, or the assurance universe, I think that would be very, very welcome going forward into year 26-27. Okay, thank you very much. It is recommended that members review, which we've done, and now note the progress with the delivery of the 25-26 internal audit plan, progress with implementing recommendations, and agree the changes to the plan detailed on pages 2 and 3 of the report. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move to item number 6, the AGS, the Annual Governance Statement 24-25. So we're casting our mind back a little bit, and I'll hand over to Isabel and Robert to introduce this report, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. So obviously we spent some time last year looking through the AGS, and we then invited sort of suggestions and opportunity to look at the way the AGS is presented. We're very grateful to all of you on the committee for forwarding your suggestions and considerations for how we might present the AGS. We have made some considerable amendments to this AGS, but we will also take into consideration the format for next year, and if we can make it improve even more. So obviously myself and Rob are here to answer your questions going forward, but we're hoping that we'd be able to agree this AGS tonight, with the exception of the addendum that we will bring once we bring the statement of accounts and the audit report to the next committee.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Robert, did you want to add anything at this point, or are we going to wait for questions? Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the AGS, please? David Howard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I apologise, but Committee Services sent an email asking with this document, asking if you, and I replied, no, I've read it through, and I said, no, I've not got any questions. But then when I got the agenda and I read through the work programme, something sprung to mind. And I've looked at both the AGS and actually the local code of corporate governance as well. And neither document has a reference in it to the SIPFA code of financial management. And I think there should be something in there, because of course the code came out in 2020 and all SIPFA members are supposed to follow it. It is good practice. In fact, even I think whether it's in the code or not, because I've not read it for a good number of years, but I don't know if there's something in it to say there should be a self-assessment undertaken and presented to audit committee, and I'm not aware that certainly in my time on this committee that we've received anything, which is why when I was looking at in respect to the work programme, I was going to suggest, could we have added to the agenda a review of compliance with the SIPFA code of financial management, if that makes sense, which then got me thinking about the AGS and is it in there? So it's sort of a circular piece of thought, if that makes sense. There's no answer. I don't need a response. Officers need to go away and think, are we complying with the code, and should it be in there as a piece of assurance that we can take on board? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, David did say he didn't need an answer, but would you care to venture an answer, either of you, or are you happy to just take that up?
Can we take that one away? I could have sworn it was in there, and I don't know whether maybe when we've made those changes we've actually taken that out of there. But I think we're talking about the self-assessment anyway, and when we do the training with Teresa on the 10th of March, we're going to talk about a slot maybe to do the self-assessment as well.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Packer.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Just a quick question on page 98, where there's reference about the risk 24-25 position, direction, and commentary. With the reference to the Lion Homes and the lessons learned reports, I was wondering whether it would be possible as part of that report to have an explanation from someone on the shareholder panel, whether that would be the chair or the chief exec, about why the panel didn't meet over an 11-month period. And I think it met once in 24-25. So I think that would just help give assurance to us from that perspective. And just, I guess, a more general question about that lessons learned report is that if internal audit request it, or whether audit committee members request it, will it be possible for us to see the minutes from those meetings of the shareholder panel? Thank you.
Quite a specific question, so I'm not sure who's probably best placed to answer that. Emily, do you want to?
So in terms of the lessons learned report and the frequency of meeting of the shareholder panel, that will be covered in that report. That's one of the elements that it will look at. In terms of the access to shareholder panel minutes, those are available to councillors who can either demonstrate through their position on a particular committee like audit or scrutiny that they need access, or through the councillor need to know protocols.
Thank you very much. I've got a question, if I may, about Lion Homes, and I think it relates to a question, David, you asked at the last meeting. I can't remember if it was the one where Emily's report about Lion Homes, I think she called it, if I may quote you, the warts and all report about it, where there was, I think you even suggested it might be no assurance for that section on Lion Homes. Now there's limited assurance at the moment, and I was just wondering about the sort of evidence that has been provided supporting that limited assurance, please. I'm happy for whoever wishes to answer that.
Well, we did that in presentation in the informal meeting, didn't we, about the evidence that supports the limited opinion. I don't think that a no assurance opinion is relevant at this stage, because I think we demonstrated that there were weaknesses, but we didn't demonstrate a complete falling over at that point that I should go to a no assurance. So I think I was still happy with limited on the basis of the evidence that we all saw and that we presented in that meeting to everyone.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, Councillor Price?
It's just a quick one, Chair. It's just more. Really thank officers for working productively with committee members, taking on board some feedback, improving the process for this year, even at short notice, and setting out to improve it in future years. And I'll certainly keep a keen eye on how that develops over the next year or two.
I think I'd certainly echo those comments. Are there any other questions that members have? We have obviously been over this a couple of times now, so I think unless anyone has got any major concerns or wants to flag anything up, last chance. Otherwise, it's recommended that the audit committee agrees this draft AGS, the annual governance statement. So we need to have the votes for. That looks. Oh, sorry. Yes, I thought I did. Apologies. Did I not? It is recommended that the. Oh, sorry. I'll propose it. Councillor Driver seconded it, and if we can just rerun that vote again. Apologies. So that's unanimous. Sorry. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you. That's item 6. As we've discussed on item 7, that will be deferred till the 10th of March, and then we move on to item 8, which is the statement of accounting policies and the state of external audit, and I'm handing over to Robert to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you is the review of the accounting policies that were used for the 25-26 statement of accounts. We bring an annual report to this audit committee, which includes the accounting policies that we will be using. As part of preparing the report, my team go through the accounting policies and also in conjunction with other pieces of information. For example, obviously we use various sort of outputs from SIPFA, from EY and other parties where we share knowledge around what elements of accounting policies need to change. So, for example, last year we changed the accounting policy for the new IFRS 16 standard that was coming in, and this year we've picked up one sort of fairly significant change, which is around the use of indexation, where we have assets that are where we have a rolling revaluation program of every five years, and the intervening period we need to use some kind of indexation to uplift the revaluations. That we've had some guidance through from SIPFA around how we need to do that. So we've obviously updated the relevant part of the accounting policies to bring that in. We've also picked up a couple of smaller changes where we feel we just need to bring the depreciation for vehicle policy in respect of right of use assets in line with the rest of the depreciation of those types of assets. So there's some consistency, and also just an update around the sort of disposals policy for the HRA to bring that in line with what the current legislation is for those particular assets. So we've done a sort of a fairly comprehensive review of the accounting policies. Those are 3 changes that we're proposing. That's kind of like the main thrust of the report. We do talk just about the audit and when we have to publish the accounts for 25-26. So we've got a publication date of the 30th of June 26, and the publication for the audited statements is a month earlier for 2020. It would be 31st of January 2027. So that's the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple, if I may. Just one about the 2 minor amendments that you mentioned on page 266. What is there going to be the impact, or is there going to be any impact on the council's balance sheet in terms of either the depreciation or the HRA assets side of things?
So if there is any impact on the balance sheet, it'd be very minimal. But it's more about having a consistent policy. Well, sorry, you should speak more about having a consistent policy rather than any material impact on the balance sheet.
And then my final question, if I may, about those deadlines that you've concluded your report on, which we've already noticed that one's basically we're going to miss one backstop. We've been very much at sort of lastminute.com with a number of the reports that have been brought to this committee. I noted that the publication of the audited statement of accounts is the 31st of January. Sorry, so that's a month forward to this year. We missed the deadline of February this year. So just what assurance can you give committee members that these deadlines, whether that be the draft statement or indeed the final audited statement, will be met in year 26-27?
So thank you, Chair. My team are fully committed and engaged in the statement of accounts process and the audit. They're always happy to learn from anything that improves those processes. I think it's important to note for the 24-25 accounts, the single entity accounts were ready on time. It was the group consolidation that caused some of the delay, and I'm confident that for 25-26 we will have a robust process in place to enable us to hit the 30th of June 2026 deadline for the publication of the draft accounts.
We look forward to seeing those. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from members? Okay, thank you very much. So the recommendation in this report is that the audit committee review the accounting policies and approve them for use in the preparation of the 25-26 statement of accounts. Yes, can we vote on that? So do I need to move that again? So I'll move it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Driver second. So all those in favour? Lovely, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item number 9, which is the work programme, and I'd like to hand over to Robert in Alex's absence to update the committee on the plan for the March meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to update members for March, there's been some movement in the agenda since it was published. As agreed today, we will bring the statement of accounts to the 10th of March meeting, and then we will receive training from our internal audit standards officer and undergo audit committee self-assessment, both of which have been on the work programme as to be confirmed for some time.
And just to clarify, I think we're going to do the training first, that Teresa will lead. That will take about an hour, and then we will have the rest of the meeting to deal with the statement of accounts, if that's okay. Wonderful. So it is recommended that committee considers and agrees this work programme, and if further information is required, it will be provided. Do we need to move that as well? Or oh, sorry, David, please do come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can, There's already been reference earlier today about talking about the internal audit undertaking a gap analysis. And when we met in October, the minutes say it was hoped to bring a report to the January meeting. But we haven't received anything. And back in October 2024, so some while ago, we were told that we'd get a report on the global internal audit standards. So we've had neither a report, which we were promised. So when can we expect the committee to receive one or both, please?
Teresa, I'm going to look to you for this one. Thank you.
So the training next time is on the global internal auditing standards. The gap analysis was finished off in January. So it's just about when I bring that to you, and it's just about which meeting is right and how it fits into the agenda. So I might suggest sometime in the summer, June or July, you can fit it in on the agenda.
Okay, can I just come back to you if I can? You just said the next meeting would be a self-assessment, but we'd be doing an internal audit self-assessment, which I presume would be against the sit for code, but obviously that's not correct because you're going to say it's about the global internal audit standards.
I think the idea was originally we do both, but now because the accounts are also coming to that meeting, it's about, are we going to have time to do both? So we're definitely going to do the training, but if there's not time to do the self-assessment, and I'm not sure there will be, then we were going to then find another day, I think, to do that quite quickly after the meeting so that we could get that done. But it's better to do the training because I think that helps with understanding when you look at the self-assessment and your viewpoint of looking at it. So it's about how we can schedule the next session in, I suppose, afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. So at least we got some. We are going to get 2 reports at some time, presumably in this calendar year. They're both going to appear. Okay, thank you. And again, where it talks about on page 292, the item to be scheduled, review of audit committee terms of reference. And again, being the individual that I am, this item came up when we did our self-assessment back in 2024, I think it was January 2024, and we were presented with an action plan at the March 2024 committee meeting to say the terms of reference were going to be reviewed and completed by July 2024. So I suppose the question now is that when are you actually going to see that document? Because it's important that the committee has its correct terms of reference. I mean, the sit for code that we were talking about was published, when? 18, was it? The sit for code of audit practice, was it updated in 2018? 22, was it? So, we're now in 2026, so terms of reference are 4 years out from the best practice that SITFA recommend. So I suppose my question then is when are we going to get updated terms of reference, please? Thank you.
Jan, I suppose you're probably the best person to
Take
answer.
that one. So I'll put it onto my work programme, but I think it's important that committee do their training, their global internal audit standards training, and do a self-assessment, and then we'll review the audit committee terms of reference. So I'll take it to put on my work programme to make sure that we do it. We're not going to have time now before we recess for the election, so it's going to have to be June, July.
No, it's absolutely clear that we do need to have that, certainly for the next civic year anyway. So it's definitely this calendar year that we are up to date and compliant with sort of sit for best guidance and best practice. Are there any other points that anyone wishes to make about the work programme going forward, please? In which case, I don't think I need to move this one. It's a note item, isn't it? So if we can just agree it, all those in favour? That looks unanimous. Thank you very much. And that ends the meeting. Thank you very much for your questions and your pertinent observations today, everyone, and for your answers, officers.